I am Carissa, 34 years old, working as a financial analyst in Chicago. For 5 years, I saved every penny for my dream home, making sacrifices most people would never understand. Last month, our family reunion should have been a time of joy and connection. Instead, it became the moment my own sister and her husband Brandon stole everything I had worked for. When I confronted them, Brandon simply sneered and said those words I will never forget. Before I continue this heartbreaking story, let me know where you are watching from and hit subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who took advantage of you. Trust me, what happened next changed everything. My life in Chicago had been stable and predictable for the past 8 years. As a financial analyst at Meridian Partners, I had built a reputation for meticulous attention to detail and sound investment advice. The irony that I could protect millions of dollars for wealthy clients but failed to protect my own savings still stings to this day. My apartment was small, just a one-bedroom on the north side of the city. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I drove a 10-year-old Honda that was paid off. I brought lunch to work every day while colleagues ordered delivery. Every small sacrifice was part of my plan. You see, I had a dream of owning a beautiful brownstone in Lincoln Park. Not a mansion, just a cozy 3-bedroom with character and history where I could build a life. For 5 years, I put away 30% of every paycheck. I skipped vacations, bought clothes at thrift stores, and said no to expensive nights out. My friends sometimes called me boring, but I had my eye on something bigger than temporary pleasures. I wanted roots, security, and a place to truly call my own. My younger sister Tiffany never understood this mindset. Growing up, she was always the favorite, though our parents would never admit it. She was the pretty one, the social butterfly, the one who could charm our parents into giving her anything she wanted. I was the responsible one, the planner, the one who everyone assumed would be fine without extra attention or support. When Tiffany met Brandon 3 years ago, I had reservations from the start. He was charming, sure, with his perfectly styled hair and confident smile, but something about him felt off. He talked big about his business ventures and future plans, but the details always seemed vague. Within 6 months of dating, they were married in a lavish ceremony that our parents paid for despite their own retirement savings taking a hit. After the wedding, Tiffany changed. The sister who once shared everything with me became secretive. Her calls became less frequent, and when we did talk, the conversation often revolved around the expensive things Brandon was supposedly going to buy her once his latest business deal went through. Those deals never seemed to materialize, though. The pattern started small. First, it was Brandon borrowing $200 to fix his car, promising to pay it back the next week. The next week turned into the next month, which turned into never. Then it was $500 for a business opportunity that was allegedly going to pay triple within 30 days. Then $1,000 when their rent was late because of some mix-up with Brandon's pay. Each time I tried to set boundaries. Each time I was called selfish. My parents sided with Tiffany as they always had. They constantly reminded me that family helps family, that Tiffany and Brandon were just going through a rough patch, that I had it easier because I only had myself to worry about. Last year, Tiffany called crying because their electricity was about to be shut off. I paid their $300 bill directly to the utility company. A week later, she posted pictures of her and Brandon at an expensive restaurant downtown. When I mentioned it, she got defensive and accused me of monitoring her life. I stopped following her on social media after that. Despite all this, I had finally reached my goal. $87,000 saved for a down payment. My real estate agent Diane had found the perfect property just 2 blocks from the park. It needed some cosmetic updates, but the bones were good and the location was everything I had dreamed of. The market was moving fast, and Diane warned me we would need to act quickly when the sellers accepted offers. The timing couldn't have been worse. The family reunion at my parents' lake cabin in Michigan had been planned for months. It was a tradition, one that brought together not just our immediate family, but cousins, aunts, and uncles from across the country. I considered skipping it, making an excuse about work, but family traditions were important to me despite everything. I thought I could attend the 3-day weekend and still be back in time to move forward with the house. That decision would cost me everything I had worked for. The drive to my parents' cabin took 3 hours from Chicago. As I pulled up the gravel driveway, I could see cars already parked everywhere. The large log cabin sat on 20 acres overlooking Lake Michigan, a property my grandfather had built and that had been in our family for generations. The smell of pine trees and the sound of water lapping at the shore brought back childhood memories of happier times. Uncle Robert was the first to greet me, his booming voice carrying across the yard as I grabbed my overnight bag from the trunk. Aunt Patty hurried over to give me a warm hug, asking about work and life in the city. My cousins Mark and Lisa waved from where they were setting up lawn games. For a moment, I felt the tension in my shoulders release. This was family. This was home. Then I saw Brandon walking toward me, a wide smile on his face. That was the first red flag. Brandon had never been particularly friendly to me. Usually he would offer a quick hello and then find an excuse to be elsewhere. But now he was approaching with open arms as if we were the best of friends. "Good to see you, Carissa. Here, let me take that," he said, reaching for my bag. "You look great. That promotion must be treating you well." I felt immediately on edge. I hadn't been promoted recently, and I certainly hadn't told Brandon about my work situation. I thanked him cautiously and looked around for my sister. Tiffany stood on the porch watching us. When our eyes met, she quickly looked away and busied herself with something in the cooler. Another red flag. As we walked toward the cabin, I noticed Brandon's wrist. He was wearing a watch I recognized from the luxury display cases I occasionally browsed, but never seriously considered. It looked like a Rolex Submariner easily, a $10,000 timepiece. He also pulled out the latest model smartphone, not just the base model, but the premium version with the largest storage capacity. When I asked about it, he laughed and said his business was finally taking off. "What business?" I asked. "Oh, investments and stuff. It's all very technical," he replied vaguely. Inside the cabin, my parents greeted me warmly. Mom was busy in the kitchen preparing her famous potato salad, while Dad was organizing the coolers for the weekend. As we caught up, I kept noticing Tiffany hovering nearby, her behavior unusually nervous. She was wearing a new diamond bracelet that caught the light when she moved. Just last month, she had called complaining about how they could barely afford groceries. During dinner that evening, conversation flowed around the large outdoor tables set up on the deck overlooking the lake. I found myself sitting next to my favorite cousin Emma, who is now a nurse in Detroit. As we caught up, I excitedly shared my news about finding the perfect house. "It's everything I ever wanted," I told her. 3 bedrooms, original hardwood floors, a little garden in the back. I can already picture myself having coffee on the front steps in the morning. I noticed Brandon had stopped his conversation and was listening intently to mine. He slid over closer to our end of the table. "That's amazing, Carissa. Congratulations," he said, seeming genuinely interested. "So what's the timeline look like? When do you close?" I explained that I was planning to submit an offer as soon as I returned to Chicago, hopefully closing within 30 days if all went well. "And you've got all the money ready to go, all in one account?" Brandon asked, his questions becoming oddly specific. At the time, I didn't think much of it. People are often curious about real estate transactions, and I was excited to talk about my plans. I shared that yes, I had been saving for years and had everything ready for the down payment. After dinner, as everyone was helping clean up, Brandon approached me again. His phone was in his hand and he looked frustrated. "My phone just died and I need to check something important for work. Do you mind if I borrow yours for just a minute?" he asked. Without thinking twice, I unlocked my phone and handed it to him. My mom called for help in the kitchen and I spent the next 15 minutes washing dishes and storing leftovers. When I returned to the living room, Brandon casually handed back my phone, thanking me for the favor. Later that night, as I was getting ready for bed in the small room I was sharing with my cousin Emma, I checked my own emails. I noticed my banking app had been opened recently, which struck me as odd since I hadn't checked it that day. I dismissed it as a glitch, or maybe I had opened it absent-mindedly earlier. The rest of the weekend was filled with family activities. Saturday morning, fishing off the dock with my dad and uncles. An afternoon hike through the woods with my cousins. A big barbecue at night with stories around the fire pit. For those brief days, it felt like old times. Tiffany even seemed to relax as the weekend progressed, joining me for a sunrise walk on Sunday morning where we talked like we used to years ago. By Sunday afternoon, as everyone was packing up to leave, there were emotional goodbyes and promises to get together more often. My parents hugged me tightly, saying they couldn't wait to see my new house once I closed. Tiffany gave me an unusually long embrace, holding on as if she didn't want to let go. "Drive safe," she whispered, and for a moment I thought I saw tears in her eyes. "It's just a 3-hour drive, Tiff." "It'll be fine," I laughed, not understanding the weight behind her words. Brandon gave me another unexpected hug and said, "Thanks for everything, Carissa. You're a good sister. We appreciate you more than you know." As I drove back to Chicago that evening, I felt a renewed sense of optimism. Despite our differences and the tension of the past few years, family was still family. Maybe Brandon was maturing. Maybe things with Tiffany would improve. Maybe we could all support each other through life's challenges after all. I had no idea that at that very moment, everything I had worked for was already gone. Monday morning, I woke up early, excited to call my real estate agent, Diane, to move forward with the offer on the house. I made coffee, sat at my small kitchen table, and opened my laptop to review the property details one more time before making the call. Everything looked perfect. The neighborhood, the layout, the potential. This was going to be my home. At 8:30, I called Diane. She answered on the second ring, her voice cheerful and energetic as always. "Carissa, I was just about to call you. The sellers are reviewing offers today. Are you ready to move forward?" "Absolutely," I told her confidently. "I just need to transfer the down payment to my checking account so it's ready for the earnest money deposit." "Perfect," she replied. "If you can get that done this morning, well, submit everything by noon." I hung up and opened my banking app on my phone, entering my password and waiting for the account to load. When the numbers appeared on the screen, I blinked, certain there was some mistake. I closed the app and reopened it. Account balance, $3,211.28. That couldn't be right. Just 4 days ago, my savings account had contained $87,000. My heart began to race, a cold sweat breaking out across my forehead. I navigated to the transaction history, my hands shaking so badly I had to try 3 times to tap the correct option. There it was. 3 separate transfers, all processed over the weekend Friday night. $29,000 transferred to an account I didn't recognize. Saturday afternoon, $29,000 to another unknown account. Sunday morning, $29,000 to a third account. My entire body went numb. The room seemed to spin around me. I felt physically ill, rushing to the bathroom where I threw up the coffee I had just consumed. This couldn't be happening. There had to be a mistake. And fraud. It had to be fraud. With trembling hands, I called my bank's fraud department. After authenticating my identity, I was placed on hold. The cheerful music playing in my ear felt like a mockery, as my entire future evaporated before my eyes. 45 minutes later, a representative finally picked up. "Miss Wilson, I've reviewed the transactions. You're concerned about the woman," said professionally. "I'm afraid these appear to be authorized transfers made from your registered mobile device using your correct credentials. But I didn't make those transfers," I insisted, my voice rising with panic. "I was at a family reunion all weekend. Someone must have hacked my account." "Were there any times when someone else had access to your unlocked phone?" she asked. The memory hit me like a physical blow. Brandon borrowing my phone. The banking app being open later that night. The oddly specific questions about my down payment. His expensive new watch and phone. Tiffany's new bracelet. Their sudden friendliness. I ended the call with the bank after they explained the investigation process, but I already knew what had happened. I tried calling Tiffany, straight to voicemail. I called again. Same result. I sent text messages that showed as delivered but remained unread. I called Brandon. No answer. In desperation, I called my parents. "Carissa, honey, What a lovely surprise, my mother answered. Did you make it home safely yesterday? Mom, I need to know something, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Have you heard from Tiffany and Brandon today? Oh yes, they stopped by this morning to show off their new SUV, she said cheerfully. Brandon said his investment finally paid off big time. It's such a beautiful vehicle, all black with those fancy wheels. They said they might take a little vacation to celebrate. Each word felt like a knife twisting in my chest. New SUV. Investment paid off. Vacation. Mom, I need to go. I'll call you back, I managed to say before hanging up. I collapsed onto my couch, the full reality crashing down on me. My own sister and her husband had stolen my life savings, my dream home, my security, my future. Everything I had worked and sacrificed for over 5 years was gone in a single weekend. I called my best friend Julia, barely able to form coherent sentences as I explained what had happened. Carissa, you need to call the police right now, she said firmly. This is theft. This is a crime. Family or not, they stole from you. But their family, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. My own sister. That makes it worse, not better, Julia insisted. If you don't report this, you'll never see that money again, and they will think they can take advantage of you forever. I sat in silence for a long moment, my mind racing with conflicting emotions: loyalty to family, the shock of betrayal, the fear of confrontation, the grief of losing my dream home, the rage building inside me toward the people who had done this. Finally, I made my decision. I'm going to their house, I told Julia. I need to see them face to face. Do you want me to come with you? She offered immediately. No, I replied, a new determination hardening in my voice. This is something I need to do myself. But stay by your phone. I'll call you after. As I grabbed my car keys and headed for the door, I had no idea that the confrontation awaiting me would forever change my relationship with my family. All I knew was that I deserved answers, and I was finally ready to stand up for myself no matter the cost. The 2-hour drive to Tiffany and Brandon's suburban home gave me too much time to think. My emotions cycled between disbelief, heartbreak, and rage. The radio played meaningless songs that I couldn't focus on. Twice I had to pull over because tears blurred my vision too much to drive safely. By the time I turned onto their street, my hands had stopped shaking, replaced by a cold, steady resolve. Their house was a modest ranch style in a newer development, nothing extravagant from the outside, which had always made their constant money problems seem legitimate. As I pulled up to the curb, the evidence of their theft sat right in the driveway, a brand new black Cadillac Escalade still with temporary plates. Next to it was Tiffany's car, confirming they were home. Through the large front window, I could see movement inside, and shopping bags scattered across the living room floor. Designer names were visible on some of the bags. Even from where I stood, my hard-earned money transformed into their luxury items. I rang the doorbell and waited, trying to control my breathing. Brandon opened the door, surprise flickering across his face before he composed himself into a casual smile. Carissa, what are you doing here? This is unexpected, he said, making no move to invite me in. We need to talk, Brandon. Now, I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. He hesitated, then shrugged and stepped aside. As I walked in, I saw Tiffany freeze in the process of unpacking something from a shopping bag. Her eyes widened with what could only be described as guilt. What is this about? She asked, her voice small. I think you both know exactly what this is about, I said, pulling out my phone and opening my banking app. $87,000. Gone. Transferred out in 3 separate transactions over the weekend, when the only people who had access to my phone were in this room. Brandon crossed his arms, his posture shifting from surprise to defensive. What are you talking about? Don't lie to me, I snapped, the anger finally breaking through. You borrowed my phone at the reunion. You transferred my money to your accounts. You stole my house down payment. Tiffany looked at Brandon, who gave an almost imperceptible nod before his entire demeanor changed. The friendly mask dropped, completely replaced by a cold smugness I'd glimpsed before, but never seen so openly displayed. "Prove it," he challenged. I pulled up the transaction history on my phone and held it up. 3 transfers. All made when my phone was in your possession. The exact weekend you suddenly have money for a new SUV and designer shopping sprees. Tiffany at least had the decency to look uncomfortable, her eyes darting between Brandon and me. She started to speak, but Brandon cut her off. "So what if we did?" he said, his voice taking on a sneering quality that made my skin crawl. "We needed it more than you. You're single with no kids. We have expenses. Besides, it's not like you can't just save up again." The callousness of his words hit me like a physical blow. I turned to my sister, desperate for some sign that she wasn't completely on board with this betrayal. "Tiffany, how could you? That's everything I worked for. 5 years of saving for my home." She fidgeted with the shopping bag in her hands, a designer purse partially visible inside. "You always had it easier than me, Carissa," she said quietly. "Everything always came easy to you. Good grades, good job, good money management. I struggle with everything. You don't know what it's like." "So you steal from me?" I asked incredulously. "Your own sister?" "It's not stealing when it's family," Brandon interjected. "It's redistribution. Besides, if you were really so smart with money, you'd have better security on your accounts." He gestured around the living room at the shopping bags. "Look at all this stuff we needed. New clothes for Tiffany? New tools for me? We're going to Disney World next month. The kids at Tiffany's work are always talking about their vacations, and she deserves to have stories to tell too." Each justification made me more furious. The entitlement, the rationalization, the complete lack of remorse. "I'm going to the police," I said, pulling out my phone again. "This is theft. Plain and simple." Brandon's face darkened. "You do that and, well, make sure the entire family knows how selfish you are. Your own sister needed help and you chose a house over family. What do you think your parents will say? The whole extended family. Who do you think they'll believe? The sister who's always been difficult and uptight, or the one with the cute family who just needed a little help?" I turned to Tiffany again, desperate for her to see reason. "Is that what you'll tell them, that I wouldn't help you? After all the times I've bailed you out, paid your bills, loaned you money you never repaid." For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of shame in her eyes. But then she moved closer to Brandon, physically taking his side. "You always act like you're better than everyone, Carissa," she said, her voice gaining confidence from Brandon's approving nod. "Always so perfect with your financial planning and your career goals. Maybe this is the universe balancing things out. Besides, it's just money. You can make more. Family is forever." "Just money," I repeated, my voice breaking. "It was my future, my home, my security. Everything I worked for." Brandon laughed, the sound cutting through me like glass. "Well, now it's our future. Our security. Go back to your little apartment and start over. Maybe save faster this time." The cruelty of their responses left me speechless. These people who shared my blood, who I had helped repeatedly despite my own financial goals, were not only stealing from me, but mocking me for caring about what they had taken. "You know what the funny thing is?" Brandon continued, clearly enjoying my distress. "You practically handed it to us. All that talk about your savings at dinner, leaving your phone unlocked. It was almost too easy." Something inside me snapped at his words. Without another word, I turned and walked out the door, their laughter following me to my car. I managed to drive around the corner before the tears came, blinding and violent. I pulled over and called Julia, barely able to speak through my sobs. "I'm coming to get you," she said immediately after I explained what had happened. "Stay where you are. Don't drive like this." 30 minutes later, Julia pulled up behind my car. She drove me back to Chicago in my vehicle while her husband followed in theirs. The entire drive back, I stared out the window, feeling hollowed out and betrayed in a way I had never experienced before. My dream home, my financial security, and my relationship with my sister were all destroyed in a single weekend. And the worst part was knowing that my family might actually take their side if Brandon spun the story well enough. After all, they always had before. But as we crossed the city limits back into Chicago, something else began to form inside me. A determination, a resolve. This time would be different. This time, I would fight back. The next few days passed in a blur of grief and shock. I called in sick to work, unable to face colleagues or clients in my current state. My apartment, which had always felt like a temporary stop on the way to my real home, now felt like a prison of shattered dreams. Every corner reminded me of what I had lost, and the betrayal that had taken it from me. On Wednesday morning, an email from Diane, my real estate agent, appeared in my inbox. Great news. The sellers accepted offers yesterday. Are you ready to submit yours? I stared at the screen, tears welling up again. The perfect house, the one I had pictured myself in for years to come, would go to someone else. With trembling fingers, I typed a response explaining that my financial situation had unexpectedly changed and I could no longer make an offer. I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth of what had happened. Her reply came quickly, full of sympathy and encouragement that other houses would come along when I was ready. But we both knew that in Chicago's competitive market, finding another perfect match at that price point could take years. Years of saving that I would have to start all over again. By Thursday, my parents had called several times, leaving increasingly concerned voicemails. I finally answered on their fourth attempt, trying to keep my voice neutral. Carissa, what's going on? My father asked immediately. Tiffany says you've been making wild accusations against her and Brandon. Something about them stealing money. She's very upset. So they had already started spinning their version of events. I wasn't surprised, but the reality of it still stung. Dad, they took my savings, I said flatly. $87,000 that I was going to use for a house down payment. Brandon used my phone at the reunion to transfer it all out. Honey, there must be some misunderstanding, my mother chimed in on the extension. Brandon told us his investment finally paid off. That's where their money came from. What investment, Mom? I asked, frustration rising in my voice. When has Brandon ever had a successful business venture? When has he ever had money to invest in the first place? There was an uncomfortable silence before my father spoke again, his tone conciliatory. Look, Carissa, even if what you're saying is true, which I'm not saying it is, but even if it were, isn't it better to just let this go? For the sake of family peace, Tiffany is your sister. Blood is thicker than water. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Even faced with the obvious truth, they were still making excuses for Tiffany and Brandon. So I should just accept that they stole my life savings? I asked incredulously. Just forget about it for family peace. We could help you with a new down payment, my mother offered hesitantly. Not the whole amount, of course, but maybe $5,000 to get you started again. Family has to stick together, Carissa. The implication was clear. They believed me on some level, but were still choosing the path of least resistance. Still enabling Tiffany and Brandon. Still expecting me to be the reasonable one who would sacrifice for the sake of harmony. I need to go, I said abruptly. I'll call you later. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. If my own parents wouldn't support me, what chance did I have of getting justice? Later that evening, a knock at my door startled me from my daze. Julia stood there holding grocery bags in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. You haven't been answering texts, so I'm implementing best friend emergency protocols, she announced, pushing past me into the apartment. She set the bags down and turned to face me, her expression serious. You're not giving up, are you? What choice do I have? I asked, slumping onto the couch. My parents basically told me to forget about it for the sake of family peace. Julia began unpacking the groceries, her movements precise and determined. That is exactly what people like Brandon count on. That decent people will choose peace over justice. That victims will stay quiet to avoid conflict. She handed me a glass of wine and sat beside me on the couch. I have someone I want you to talk to. Stephen Lewis. He's a lawyer who specializes in fraud cases. And he's a friend who will give you a consultation for free. I don't know, Julia, I sighed. Taking legal action against my own sister is exactly what you should do, she finished firmly. Carissa, listen to me. This isn't about the money anymore. This is about you standing up for yourself. If you let them get away with this, what message does that send? That you're a doormat they can walk all over whenever they need something. Her words stung, but I knew she was right. This pattern with Tiffany and Brandon would never end unless I put a stop to it. The next day I met with Stephen Lewis in his downtown office. He was a sharp-featured man in his 50s, with kind eyes that balanced his otherwise intimidating demeanor. I told him everything from the family dynamics to the specifics of the theft. You have a strong case, he said after I finished. The transfers were made without your authorization from your device while it was in their possession. The timing aligns perfectly with their sudden purchases. It's not just circumstantial evidence. My stomach twisted. But would I have to testify against my own sister? Stephen leaned forward, his expression softening slightly. Miss Wilson, family fraud is more common than you might think. It's also one of the most underreported crimes because of exactly the conflict you're feeling right now. But ask yourself this. If a stranger had stolen $87,000 from you, would you hesitate to report it? Of course not, I admitted. Your sister and brother-in-law are counting on your family loyalty to protect them from consequences. They betrayed that loyalty, not you. Over the next few days, I threw myself into building my case. I obtained phone records showing exactly when Brandon had possession of my phone. I discovered that my parents' cabin had security cameras installed last year after a break-in at a neighboring property. The footage clearly showed Brandon on the porch hunched over a phone during the exact time frame when the first transfer was made. I found social media posts where Brandon had cryptically mentioned coming into a financial windfall. I documented the timeline of their purchases. I gathered evidence of every instance where I had loaned them money in the past that had never been repaid. Each piece of evidence strengthened my resolve, but the question of Tiffany's involvement troubled me deeply. She was clearly complicit, but was she a willing participant or under Brandon's influence? The sister I grew up with would never have done this to me, but people change. Or perhaps I had never really known her at all. The most difficult part was preparing for the family fallout. Stephen warned me that taking legal action would likely cause a permanent rift with some family members. Was I prepared for that possibility? At first, the thought terrified me. Despite everything, family had always been my anchor. But as I reflected on recent years, I realized that what I thought of as family loyalty had become a one-way street. I gave, they took. I compromised, they demanded. I forgave, they repeated the same behaviors. A week after the discovery, I was ready. Stephen had prepared the legal documents. The bank fraud department had completed their preliminary investigation. The police report had been filed. Everything was in place for the next step. I called Julia the night before. Thank you for pushing me to do this, I told her. I don't think I would have had the courage without you. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Carissa, she replied. Always have been. You just needed a reminder. That night I barely slept. Tomorrow would change everything for better or worse, but for the first time since discovering the theft, I felt something other than despair. I felt powerful. I felt righteous. And most importantly, I felt like myself again. The following Saturday, I drove back to Tiffany and Brandon's house, my car now filled with purpose rather than grief. In the passenger seat sat my large designer bag, a Christmas gift from a grateful client last year. It contained every piece of evidence, every legal document, and every ounce of courage I had managed to gather over the past week. As I pulled up to their house, I noticed the new Escalade still prominently displayed in the driveway like a trophy. The curtains in the front window were open, giving me a clear view of Tiffany moving around inside. This time there would be no surprise visit. I had texted them that morning, saying we needed to talk about a family matter. Brandon had replied with a dismissive, "Just stop by whenever we're around all day." I took a deep breath, grabbed my bag, and walked to the door with my head held high. When I rang the doorbell, Brandon answered almost immediately, that same smug expression on his face from our last encounter. "Back for more family drama?" he asked, his tone mockingly light. "I thought you'd be busy saving for your next down payment by now." I forced a neutral expression and stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Tiffany was in the living room, surrounded by shopping bags from high-end stores. She at least had the decency to look uncomfortable at my arrival. "Carissa, I wish you'd call before just showing up," she said quickly, pushing some of the bags behind the couch. I noticed a stack of brochures on the coffee table. Disney World vacation packages, exactly as Brandon had mentioned during our last confrontation. My money funding their family vacation while I had to start over from scratch. Brandon closed the door and leaned against it, arms crossed. "So what's this family matter you wanted to discuss? More accusations? Or have you finally come to your senses and realized that family helps family?" His condescending tone made my blood boil, but I maintained my composure. I looked directly at Tiffany instead of him. "I wanted to give you both one chance to make this right," I said calmly. "Return my money and we can discuss a payment plan that doesn't involve the courts." Brandon laughed loudly, the sound echoing through the room. "Are you still on about that? We told you the money was from my investment finally paying off. Stop being so dramatic." Tiffany nodded in agreement, though she wouldn't meet my eyes. "It's true, Carissa. Brandon's been working on this deal for months. The timing was just a coincidence." I set my bag down on the coffee table with deliberate slowness. "Then you won't mind what's coming next." They both looked momentarily confused, then Brandon snorted dismissively. "What more empty threats going to tell Mom and Dad again? They already agreed this is just a big misunderstanding." As they laughed, a loud bang shook the house. All three of us jumped heads, turning toward the front door where the sound had come from. The door flew open with enough force to hit the wall behind it. In the doorway stood two police officers in uniform, followed by a woman in a suit who I recognized as Diana Martinez from the bank's fraud investigation team. Behind them was Stephen, my lawyer, holding a briefcase. The looks on Tiffany and Brandon's faces would have been comical under different circumstances. Pure shock followed by confusion, followed by the first flickers of fear. "Brandon Wilson," one of the officers asked, though it was clear he already knew the answer. "Yes," Brandon replied, his voice suddenly much less confident. "We have a warrant to question you regarding a fraud investigation involving unauthorized financial transactions," the officer stated formally, handing Brandon an official-looking document. "Wednesday, like you, to come with us to answer some questions." Before Brandon could respond, Stephen stepped forward and handed him another set of papers. "Mr. Wilson. Stephen Lewis, attorney representing Carissa Wilson. This is notice of a civil lawsuit being filed against you for the fraudulent transfer of $87,000 from my client's accounts. We have documentation proving the transfers were made from her phone while it was in your possession, along with evidence of your subsequent spending of those funds." Brandon's face had drained of all color. "This is ridiculous." "You're making a mistake," he stammered, looking desperately at Tiffany for support. Miss Martinez from the bank stepped forward next. "Mr. Wilson, our investigation has confirmed that the transfers in question were made from Miss Carissa's phone during times when she has provided evidence it was in your possession. The receiving accounts have been traced to shell accounts opened in your name 3 days before the transfers occurred. This constitutes digital theft and banking fraud, both federal offenses." The calculated precision of my response team left Brandon speechless. His mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. Tiffany had shrunk into the couch, tears already streaming down her face. What perfect timing. As the officers were explaining Brandon's rights to him, the front door opened once more. My parents walked in, followed by my Uncle Robert and Aunt Patty. I had called them all that morning, asking them to meet me at Tiffany and Brandon's house at exactly 11:30 to discuss an important family matter. "What's going on here?" my father demanded, taking in the scene with wide eyes. "Why are there police officers?" I turned to face my family, my voice steady and clear. Brandon stole my entire savings using my phone during the family reunion. $87,000. The money for my house. The bank has confirmed it. The police are investigating, and I'm suing them both to get it back. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My father's expression darkened as he looked between me and Brandon, the truth finally sinking in. Is this true? He asked Brandon directly. Before Brandon could formulate a denial, Tiffany broke down completely. It was his idea, she cried, pointing at Brandon. He said we deserved it more than she did. He said she'd just save it up again. I told him it was wrong, but he said family helps family. Brandon's face contorted with rage. Shut up, Tiffany, he hissed. Don't say another word. But the dam had broken. Tiffany continued through her sobs. He planned it all weekend. He watched for a chance to get her phone. He already had the account set up. He transferred it in 3 batches, so it wouldn't trigger fraud alerts. He said no one would believe her if she accused us. The officers exchanged glances clearly, considering this an admission. They moved toward Brandon, who was now backing away. Sir, we're going to need you to come with us now, one of them said firmly. What followed was a blur of activity. Brandon was escorted out to the police car for formal questioning. Miss Martinez took photographs of the recent purchases still scattered around the house as evidence. Stephen conferred with my parents, explaining the legal process that would follow. Tiffany remained on the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. After everyone else had moved outside or to other rooms, I sat beside her, maintaining a careful distance. How could you do this to me? I asked quietly. After everything, how could you steal from your own sister? She looked up, her makeup streaked down her face. He controls everything, Carissa. The money, the decisions, everything. At first it was romantic how he took charge, but then… She trailed off, shaking her head. It's no excuse. I knew it was wrong. I just didn't know how to stop it once it started. I wanted to comfort her out of habit, but I held back. Years of being the responsible sister, the one who fixed everything, made it difficult. But this wasn't something I could or should fix with a hug and forgiveness. You had choices, Tiffany. You could have warned me. You could have said no. You could have called me afterward. Instead, you went shopping with my money and planned a vacation. She nodded miserably. I know. I got caught up in it all. The nice things, the vacation we could never afford before. It was like a fantasy. But these past few days, I've barely slept. The guilt. I just kept telling myself you'd be okay because you're always okay. My parents re-entered the room, both looking shell-shocked. They sat across from us, my father leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. We owe you an apology, Carissa, he said, his voice heavy with regret. We should have believed you immediately. We should have questioned where their money suddenly came from. My mother nodded tearfully. We always thought we were helping Tiffany by giving her extra support, but maybe we were just teaching her that she didn't have to be responsible for her actions. It was the first time I had ever heard them acknowledge their role in enabling Tiffany's behavior. Under different circumstances, it might have been a healing moment. But the betrayal was still too fresh, the wound too deep. The bank will be freezing their accounts, I explained. The lawsuit will seek full restitution plus damages. I'm not backing down this time. Nor should you, my father said, firmly surprising me. This crossed every line. There have to be consequences. Tiffany sobbed harder at his words but didn't argue. For once, she was facing the reality of her actions without anyone rushing to shield her from the fallout. As I gathered my things to leave, I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. The money wasn't back in my account yet. The dream house was lost. The legal process would be long and difficult. But for the first time in my adult life, I had stood up for myself without compromise, without putting everyone else's needs before my own. And surprisingly, the world hadn't ended. In fact, the truth had finally set me free. 3 months passed before Brandon's case made its way through the legal system. In the end, faced with overwhelming evidence, he accepted a plea deal. The court ordered full financial restitution of the $87,000 plus $15,000 in additional damages. He received 2 years probation and 200 hours of community service. The judge had been particularly stern, noting that family fraud was an especially egregious breach of trust. The money was returned to me through a court-monitored payment plan. Brandon's new SUV was sold along with most of their recent purchases. It wasn't an immediate recovery of everything that was taken, but it was justice in motion. Tiffany moved back in with our parents a week after Brandon's arrest. Their marriage, it seemed, could not withstand the strain of consequences finally catching up to them. She filed for separation, citing emotional manipulation and financial control as primary factors in her decision. Our relationship remained complicated. I wasn't ready to welcome her back into my life with open arms, but I didn't shut the door completely either. We began meeting once a month with a family counselor, slowly rebuilding a foundation that had been cracked long before the theft occurred. In our third session, she made a confession that took me by surprise. "I was always jealous of you, Carissa," she admitted quietly. "You seemed so together, so capable. I felt like I was constantly failing in comparison. It was easier to resent you than to learn from you." The counselor encouraged us to explore these feelings, helping Tiffany recognize that her perception of me as perfect was as unfair as my perception of her as hopelessly irresponsible. We were both more complex than the roles we had been assigned in our family dynamic. My parents underwent their own reckoning during this time. They apologized repeatedly for not believing me initially and for years of enabling behavior that had contributed to the situation. My father in particular seemed determined to make amends, offering financial help that I gently declined. This was something I needed to rebuild on my own terms. By the 6-month mark, I had received enough of the restitution money to begin house hunting again. The perfect brownstone was long gone, but Diane, my ever-patient real estate agent, helped me find a different property. It was smaller than my original dream home, but it had character and potential. Most importantly, it was mine, purchased with money that now carried the weight of a hard-won battle, rather than just years of careful saving. The day I closed on the house, Julia helped me move in, christening the new space with takeout Chinese food eaten on the floor of the empty living room. "Are you sad about losing the first house?" she asked as we broke open fortune cookies. I considered the question carefully. A little. It was perfect. But maybe it wasn't meant to be my home after all. This one feels right for where I am now. Which was true. The person who had saved for that first house was different from the woman who now held these keys. I had changed, grown stronger and more defined in my sense of self. This house would be filled with boundaries as well as dreams, with hard-earned wisdom as well as hope. The experience had transformed my approach to family as well. I learned that true family doesn't take advantage of your love. It doesn't use loyalty as a weapon or generosity as an expectation. Sometimes, the family you choose, like Julia, who had stood by me without hesitation, proves more reliable than the one you're born into. That didn't mean I had given up on my blood relatives. Tiffany and I continued our monthly counseling sessions, making slow but steady progress. She had found a job and was learning to support herself for the first time without Brandon or our parents as a safety net. There were setbacks and difficult conversations, but also moments of genuine connection that gave me hope for the future of our relationship. I had also established clear boundaries with my parents. No more enabling behavior. No more expectations that I would be the responsible one who sacrifices for everyone else. No more looking the other way when someone crosses a line. They were uncomfortable with these changes at first, but gradually came to respect the new dynamic. As for Brandon, he remained on the periphery of our family, completing his community service and making the court-ordered payments. I had no desire to rebuild any relationship with him, and the rest of the family seemed to follow my lead in this decision. Some betrayals cut too deep for full reconciliation. Security became a priority in my new life. I implemented 2-factor authentication on all my accounts. I never shared passwords or left my phone unlocked around others. I maintained a separate emergency fund that only I knew about. These weren't signs of paranoia, but of healthy self-protection. The most valuable lesson, though, was learning that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. It's an act of self-respect that ultimately earns the respect of others. The temporary discomfort of confrontation is far less painful than the long-term erosion of being taken advantage of repeatedly. 1 year after the family reunion that changed everything, I hosted a small housewarming gathering in my new home. Julia and her husband were there, along with colleagues who had become friends, neighbors I had bonded with, and yes, my parents and Tiffany. The house wasn't as large as the one I had originally dreamed of, but it was filled with people who truly cared about my well-being, not what they could take from me. As I looked around at the gathering, I realized that the betrayal that had felt like the end of my world had actually been the beginning of a better one. A world where I valued myself enough to demand that others do the same. Where I understood that forgiveness doesn't mean allowing someone to hurt you again. Where I recognized that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to hold them accountable. Have you ever had to stand up to family who tried to take advantage of you? It's one of the hardest things to do, but sometimes it's the only way to break toxic patterns. Leave a comment below sharing your experience or how you would have handled my situation. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength through difficult family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that protecting your boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for a healthy life. Stay strong, and I'll see you in the next video.